After the High Queen made up her mind after feeling what the Tertiary Queen had sent, the bug fleets began to move, but not just to take a single planet full of dangerous, genetically diverse, very interesting, murderous mammals. They also moved to adjust the lines. Due to the scream of fear the Tertiary Queen had sent, it's clear that the creatures of this soul sector are worth defending against. This moment is a welcome one to the other sentients of the galaxy. At first, it just allows them more time to defend against the bugs, more time to build defenses, more time to train, more time to stock ordnance, and for the first time in centuries, time is actually on their side. The bug fleet that would be heading towards the Earth is much larger than the one before, led by a full sub-queen with 3 tertiary queens in tow. Their job is simple: collect all genetic material possible. All else is free to consume. This is more than enough motivation even without the hive mind pushing them. Yet it will still take 666 human years to reach this Soul 3. That's a long time to build your appetite. It's also a lot of time to build hatred. On Earth, the few drones that were still alive are captured really quick and brought in for study. The sentient fleet heard about this and immediately demanded the extermination of the few drones, fearing they were going to evolve into a queen. As they showed this fear of this potential of what can happen, the humans shocked the fleet by claiming they were already aware of such changes. They know it in something they call a video game. Yet, in spite of this danger, information is ammunition, and humanity is going to need all the ammo they can get. Humanity welcomed the sentient species fleet and quickly made a deal. In exchange for the fleet's technological knowledge, humanity will take care of their little bug problem. Though hesitant at first, the council voted into the deal, and at this point, humanity got to work. At first, the only thing they could see is transport ships. Ships that would travel beyond the atmosphere and begin cleaning up the skies. Using this debris, they built space stations and space docks with incredible speed and efficiency. Robots of all sizes and shapes aid in the construction of massive fleets, massive engineering suites, and everything else they're going to need. This was around the very first time the sentient fleet noticed something. The humans were not just copying the designs that were given. No, they did it first, of course, but soon, very soon, with the next group that came out, they altered them, adjusted them, dissected, and then rebuilt them. They made the technology simply better. Not only that, but humans were making improvements to technology that had been considered the absolute peak of technological excellence centuries ago. And yet now, you have shielding that could originally only deflect a single plasma strike from a bug before fading off. Now, these same shields can take over a dozen hits before even flickering from stress, not even failing. Armored hulls that could barely survive a single strike before now have the ability to not only deflect solid projectiles, but absolutely tank direct hits with only minor damage. Even direct hits, even if they could penetrate, were completely contained the way humans design their ships. Sensor systems from the humans became so robust that within a human decade and a half, they could monitor areas so well that the idea of an ambush actually became a laughable notion. Then there were the weapons. Human weapons originally started off at their sentient standard, yet quickly grew in size and definitely in power. A human's main projectile weapon, a mass driver cannon, is designed to launch a projectile at 0.8 the speed of light, which was more than double the speed of what the sentients had actually got to. Not only that, but they were truly scaring the other sentients with what was known as a magazine that fed one shot right after another, a process that used to take 2.3 human minutes to fire from one shot to another now took 17 seconds. Yet that was not enough for the humans. Humans' direct-fire frigates used 7 barrels for each of the 4 fixed weapon systems. All of them fired in succession, one right after another, allowing them to reload, recharge, and cool down, and each burst could easily tear apart a bug battleship if strafed across the side. Then, there were the human missile and torpedo frigates. Not only that, but the missiles and torpedoes were all inside the other ships as well, yet these frigates carried an impressive amount. This was horrifying, with its insane number of guided projectiles. Every single time they saw one, it made the sentient fleet shudder. The missiles were very nimble and detonated close, if not directly on the target. Upon exploding, they would shoot a cone of death in the form of metallic spheres, and they would erupt across the surface of whatever they were chasing, perforating the target. It's an excellent weapon for lighter craft, yet that is just the appetizer. The main course is the slower armored torpedo, each one having its own countermeasures to intercept anything that might shoot it down on its way to the target, as well as stealth capabilities to make sure it actually does strike its target. Upon reaching a set range, the rear torpedo actually detaches and a dash function activates. This forces a torpedo to move at least 3 times faster than it normally had. This allows the torpedo to bury itself deep inside the ship by creating its own orifice before exploding inside the ship's guts. If the ship's carapace actually holds from the explosion, the insides will look like they had been gone through a blender, and the only thing coming out are going to be the entrails of these living ships. Then, of course, there were the energy weapons. Weapons that, if focused on a ship, they could pierce it in just a few moments. A glancing strike is more than enough to cut large pieces off the ship. In practice, it's just easier to sweep them across the battlefield with the energy beams so they can cut everything to pieces. Humans also do have pulse cannons, yet the effective range is negligible compared to the other systems, meaning they are limited in number, but devastating at close ship combat, which is why every single destroyer still carries several of them. When humans were asked how they came up with these weapons and defenses so fast, the answer is always something akin to, "Nothing strokes the human fires of creativity faster than the desire to kill a motherfucker." This was a good thing, as the bugs are absolutely relentless once they find a target. The sentient species actually offered more ships and personnel to aid in Sol's defense, yet the humans denied this, saying, "Protect your own lands," which is exactly what they did. The sentients continued to build fleets, but used some of the inspiration from the humans. In turn, dreadnoughts were looked at as a waste of resources before, but now they think if those war-loving red bloods believe it's going to be worth it, it's going to be worth looking into. As the bug fleet made its jump into Sol, they arrive hungry. Hungry for blood. Hungry for genetic material. Hungry for a fight. Hell, it could be said that they're just hungry. Yet it isn't so easy to catch a meal when your food actually does shoot back. Upon entering the system, the humans had one message sent to the bugs: go back. In their arrogance, the bugs had not even gotten into formation before engaging the human fleets. In response, the humans fired everything. Beams of energy streaked across space in a waving pattern, both vertically and horizontal, as mass drivers pumped out wave after wave of hardened death. Behind them were the missiles, torpedoes, and so many drones that they created a full ring of death around the battlefield. These drones limited the movement of the bugs, along with making a new impossible way to lock onto targets. Reason being is there's just too many to lock onto, even for the living supercomputers that were the insect queens. The sub-queen saw all this and laughed at the idea of these primitives being able to stand up against her forces. Yet she didn't mind the meat was being tenderized in battle, or possibly flash frozen from being exposed to the void. In fact, the exercise of taking them down will make the meal taste even better. She believed this, as her vessels outnumbered the humans at least 18-1, not counting the drones, of course. Her hubris did not last, as the reality was about to make her cry. The energy beams waved across the void, instantly cutting and detonating any ship they touched. She watched in horror as hundreds of ships with billions of drones fell to their might. The landing ships could not move very well in space, and they were fully loaded, and when they were struck, they exploded, but not in fire, no, with bodies that spread out across space and twitched as they died in their hibernation. The mass driver shots pierced clear through even the largest ships in the forward fleet. 2 of the 3 tertiary queens went silent in just a moment. The third exuded pure fear as she had her ship perforated. The tertiary queen scrambled for aid as the missiles tore apart her smaller vessels, leaving everything exposed. Try as she might, she was not stopping the torpedoes that were right behind the missiles. The sub-queen looked on in sheer horror as the torpedoes busted forward and drove deep into the tertiary queen's ship. The cascade of explosions forced the ship to simply fall apart from the inside out. The last thing the sub-queen felt from the tertiary queen was pain. Pain as a torpedo had exploded right next to her, blowing off all the limbs of her left side, right before the queen's chamber was vented into space. Now, the sub-queen is alone, and with less than half of the forces that she arrived with. At this moment, the primal fear overran the hive mind. Not only was she afraid for herself, but the mental backblast from all the forces that she had just lost is getting her to her absolute limit, making it so she can't even focus. Deep in the void, the High Queen felt this and struggled trying to keep control of the Sub-Queen. Yet it was almost too much for the High Queen, as she could feel what was going on. She could feel and almost see it with her own eyes, the waving of the energy beams that cut through the fleet, the constant accurate strikes from the main guns, some of which that seemed to be firing out in bursts, going right down the sides of battleships, spreading them into pieces, and then she saw her largest ships torn apart in moments. The unrelenting, seeking ordnance that was trying to tear all the ships apart from the inside out. It was just too much for either of them, especially with the screaming of the drones and everything else inside. All the ships, everything dying so much. The Sub-Queen, at that moment, broke free for the very first time. And with nowhere to go but forward or back, she realized she couldn't go forward towards the human fleet. She called out to the older sentient fleets behind the humans. She screamed out, "Call them off! Please, call off the humans!" The Sub-Queen ship, which was slightly larger than the moon, could take the energy strikes, could deflect most of the ballistic missile hits. The torpedoes are slow, so she might be able to get away if she backs away fast enough. That is until the massive swarm of nearly 8 billion drones turned towards her and drove straight towards her ship. The drones had no fear and went straight towards the ship and attached themselves. Once there, they began to cut away at the outside carapace via an integrated torch in each of the drones. When They were able to make a large enough hole in the ship's chitinous shell. They drilled their way in, sometimes spinning themselves, sometimes forcing the hole open, but every single time the ship screamed in pain of what was happening. They continued their way into the ship, that is, until they ran out of ways to dig deeper into this large, massive, bulbous, Titan-class ship. That is when they paused for just a moment and then exploded. All across the surface of the Queen's ships, there were bursts being seen, ripping even larger holes in the ship as the drones exploded. These open holes made it possible for the main guns, the torpedoes, to enter any of the Queen's holes, drive deep, and penetrate deep inside, detonating, spewing hot plasma all over the place, along with the force of the explosion rearranging the guts of the ship. The Queen and the ship died together, screaming in pain, a scream that resonated across the entire galaxy, a scream that made every sentient and every insectoid shiver in fear. For a mere moment, the High Queen lost control of her entire species, but only for a moment. After coming back to herself, she calmed herself down, reestablished her hive mind, but came to a realization that was only slightly calming. She thought to herself, the humans are a single planetary species, so they would protect their home very viciously. Perhaps that is why they won. Well, they're dangerous for sure, but they would never reach across the galaxy to our territory, right? Right? Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on part 2 of this ongoing series. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Alan Williams. And I also need to send out some giant thank yous to the supporters of this channel. Without you, I wouldn't be here. And those are Sir Prozac and Pancakes, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Joseph Blush, and Guardian Sage. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax.
Ejecting pilot.